Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. I'm really happy I'm able to do this next video for you guys. This is a little ball that I had at home. It's a wooden ball, but unfortunately it's been used too much and it went in the dishwasher a few times by mistake. So the beige whitish stuff that you can see on the ball is the varnish that went white in the dishwasher. So it was just one of those objects that I could have thrown away, but I decided to use it for this week's projects and just try and make something pretty out of it. So the first step is, as you can see, is to sand down the excess varnish, which is no good anymore. So that came off pretty easily. You don't really need to remove all of it, but if you see areas that are flaky, you know, areas that you think might cause a problem later on, you just sand them down. A lot of it didn't even have any varnish on it, it was all gone. So I spent a few minutes sanding it down, get it ready to be used as a base for this week's mosaic. It's a nice way to reuse something that you love, but that doesn't look very nice anymore. And here we have these gold tiles. I have spoken about these before. These are handmade gold leaf tiles. That doesn't mean that the whole tile is gold, but it just means that it's basically a sandwich. So it's sandwich tile. It's gold leaf sandwiched between two layers of glass. The bottom layer, which is the blue that you can see, is thicker. It's about 4 millimeters thick. Then you have a layer of gold leaf, which is very, very, very thin. And then on top of that, you get another thin layer of glass to protect the gold and to have these tiles. These are fired in a kiln, just like all the other glass tiles that we use in mosaic art. They are suitable for outdoor use. They are expensive, as you can imagine. What I'm using here is glass that I have left over from my previous commissions, and this particular lot was offcuts. So usually these types of tiles come pre-cut, so when you buy them they're already cut into squares. I think you can choose what size squares you want. There's 2 or 3 different sizes in from some companies, but usually they are squares 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. But in this case I am using offcuts. So some companies sell offcuts of gold and they are a little bit cheaper. In my opinion, they are beautiful. These tiles are made not only in Italy but in other places as well, Greece, Russia, and apparently in China as well. So, but the method is a very old one. These kind of gold tiles were used in Islamic buildings sometimes, but mainly in churches. So the Orthodox churches mainly that you find in Greece, and churches that are now Catholic in Italy, or even in Turkey. Obviously you have Saint Sophia, Hagia Sophia, which is the big cathedral in Constantinople. The gold that you see in these mosaic icons is virtually the same as what you're seeing right now. So it's handmade gold tiles that were made in those days, and there are companies nowadays that follow these traditions and make these types of tiles now. And they also make smalti, which is a type of more expensive glass that was also made and used in churches and other buildings. It is something that you can use in your own work. You can buy a small amount of it and just incorporate it into any type of work you are doing. It will just give a different dimension, different quality, level of quality to your work. If you want to make something special for a loved one, or as a Christmas present or anything like that, it's a nice touch. I just happen to have lots of it because, like I said, it was left over from projects that I have done in the past. This type of glass was very important because when they made these icons, it was important to have real gold in the background and real gold halos. As you can imagine, real gold reflects the light in a completely different way than if you had a background that was, say, yellow or blue or something like that. So it was important to have this very special light inside the church. But like I said, this type of tile has been used in other types of buildings as well, secular buildings, Islamic buildings. And nowadays, you might even see it in some, mosaics in very, very fancy shops in Italy. I have seen it once in a very fancy shoe shop. In the display window, there was a background of real gold tiles. So it is something that is used nowadays as well. Obviously, you can also use mirror tiles for something like this. And they can also be very, very beautiful in a mosaic project. They come in lots of different colors. You saw the tiles that I used in my other video, in the Moroccan coffee table video. I used silver, which was exactly like the ones you're seeing now, but I also used those blue tiles that were basically mirror tiles, but with a texture at the back of them. So you can use something like that as well. I've started doing the edge of the bowl. It was easy because I already had these offcuts that were the right width that I wanted. And the glue that I am using, if you have watched some of my previous videos, if you have watched last week's video, you will recognize the glue that I used last week. This is the Gorilla. It says on there, incredibly strong. It's a glue. This specific glue is a glue you can use for glass on glass mosaics, glass on wood, wood on wood, glass tiles on a porcelain base. It's a good thing to have if you're starting out and you would like to buy something that you can use more than once. Obviously, it's a great glue to use around the house as well for repairing things, and it's basically a lot stronger than just an ordinary clear glue. So I do enjoy using it. It gives you a window of time to move around your pieces, so it doesn't dry immediately. It does dry quite fast, meaning it'll dry, within a few hours, but you have maybe 5 minutes to move your tiles around if you've changed your mind. So that can be really, really useful. As you can imagine, obviously, when you're working, when you're making a mosaic directly onto your base. So it is useful to have that. You will notice that when I'm searching for the next piece, I'm not using my fingers. Please try to remember that. I have developed a habit of looking through the glass with my tweezers. So that's what I do when I'm looking for a specific piece. I use my tweezers, but you can use a spatula or a spoon or something like that. Don't put your hands in a bowl that's full of glass tiles. Now you can see the edge of the bowl is blue because the bottom of the glass is blue. And I'm moving on to the inside of the bowl. Obviously the inside is curved, so I just need to think a little bit about the right shape of tiles, the right size rather, that will follow that curve. You want your tiles to stick properly onto the surface, so you want to try and not have an air gap behind your tile when you're trying to follow a curve, say in a bowl or any other curved object. And that means that sometimes you might have to cut your tiles narrower or smaller to try and follow that curve, because otherwise the tiles will come off more easily. The tiles I'm using right now are exactly the same as the other ones, except the gold leaf is, I'm not sure if they've put colored glass on top or if they've put color on top of the gold, but basically they are gold tiles that are colored. So again, this is not something that I bought. This is something that I collected over the years. It was free samples that were given to me when I was doing commissions, and the people that commissioned me to do work were paying for the gold, and then I would just get a free sample of a little bit of, say, gold blue tiles or gold green tiles, and this is what I have here. They've been sitting in a box for a very, very long time, and I thought now would be a nice time to use them for something and to actually enjoy them instead of them sitting in a box hidden away somewhere. A lot of them are already cut for me. They're squares, and some of them are offcuts, so they are random shapes. So what I started doing was I did basically a cross shape. So one line going across the middle of the bowl, and then with the squares, and then another line going vertically across the other side of the bowl. And I just kind of used that as a base for the rest of my design. It would have been easier to use all squares in this case, but I decided that I didn't want the bowl to be all squares inside. I wanted it to have maybe a little bit more character. So you will see in a minute that I started using random shapes. I didn't need to do a lot of cutting at the moment because I had a lot of tiles that were already square, but like I have said many times before, there are times that you will have to cut specific shapes, and sometimes it is important to learn how to cut properly. For example, when you want to follow a curve, then you will need to cut your tiles at an angle, so into like trapezoid shapes or triangles, or it's trial and error. You learn as you go, but it does make a difference to the end result. So what I'm trying to say is that if you put a little bit more effort in the beginning, you will be more pleased with the result in the end. I think when you're working on a curved surface like this, you want to start in the middle if possible, and then move outwards. If you start all around the edge, that's also an option, but your pieces might start sliding down like they did last week when I was doing the glass vase. So you just have to see how your glue or how your adhesive is behaving, and if you think that the tiles will stay in place, then by all means you can start all around the edge. But I think in this case it was better to start with guidelines, starting from the middle and then working upwards. There's also some greys in there, and even the black ones that you see, they are also actually gold, but they are tinted in black. They just have a very unique shine to them. When you are working on something like this, I suppose you need to find something that has the same thickness. So sometimes it doesn't matter if the tiles are a different thickness, if you are doing a mosaic that's going to hang on the wall, or a mosaic that's going to be like a sort of a display plaque or something like that. But if you're doing something that you actually want to use, like a bowl or a plate, for displaying things, you want to have at least a similar thickness. And these tiles, even though they are handmade, they are mostly the same thickness. They are about 4 millimeters thick. The cutters that I'm using, I'm just going to mention it again in case this is the first time you are watching one of my videos. These are called wheeled nippers. You can find them online in specialized mosaic art or craft shops. They cost around 20 to 22 pounds as far as I know. The ones that I am using are Leponit. They seem to be the more popular brand. There are other ones you can find, cheaper ones, but they might not work as well as these ones. So really it depends on how much you want to invest, and if you're planning to do mosaics long term, then I would definitely recommend buying a pair of good cutters. You know, that's your number one tool when you're doing mosaics. The second thing that you might need is a pair of tweezers. You can find tweezers anywhere, but I'm talking about tweezers that are kind of pointed at the end of them, and it just gives you more control. So right now I'm working with my hands, and I'm just using my hands, but a lot of the time I use tweezers to place my tiles exactly where I want them to go. And it's just one of those things you need to find what suits you, what's comfortable for you. You can find tweezers in craft shops, in mosaic shops, like online shops as well. You don't need to pay a fortune for them. The ones I'm using here were actually really, really cheap, but they turned out to be very good. I'm not sure where they use them. But think outside the box, you can find the things that you need in places where you don't expect them. I mean, for example, I've seen people repairing mobile phones, and they might be using tweezers. So you never know, if you just go online and you type in tweezers or craft tweezers or something like that, I'm sure you can find something suitable. So as you can see here, I have almost done the 2 central lines that are just straight lines, and then there's 4 sections where I am using squares as well as random shapes. But of course, that made it more complicated for me. So even though it's such a small bowl, it took me a long time to complete it. I started very well. I was working quite fast, and then towards the end, it was just taking me a long time, because the reason for that is that when you use random shapes, it looks very straightforward, but if you want your pieces to be very, very close together, like what I'm doing now, you will inevitably end up with some areas where you will have these different shapes, and you will have to cut your tiles into a very specific shape to fit in, to close the puzzle, basically, to complete the puzzle. But that's what I wanted to do. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you're doing a background or something with random shapes and you're not really bothered about the gaps, then obviously it makes things much easier. You can just start sticking the pieces down, and if you do have any awkward gaps left, you just put any piece in just to fill in the gap. That's called crazy paving, I believe. But in this case, I'm not doing crazy paving. I am thinking about every piece, where it's going to go, what space is there for the next piece. So I am also thinking about the space that will be left over for my next piece. And you can see already that there are areas where I will have to cut some small triangles or some small pieces. That's okay with me. If you have a good pair of cutters, then that will make it much easier for you. Now, there is also another type of cutters that are, I suppose, more popular, and they are really meant to be for tiles, like the tiles that we use in the houses, so ceramic tiles, and they are fine for cutting ceramic, some kinds of softer stone tiles. You can use those for a good pair of those cutters. I don't have a picture to show you now. It will be around about 12 to 13 pounds, but then for an extra 10 pounds, you can buy these wheeled nippers, which are really ideal for glass tiles. So really, if you're into mosaics, you need 2 types of cutters. One will be the wheeled nippers for glass tiles or stained glass tiles, and even you can even cut buttons with them. I have done that before. Or the glass nuggets that you find in homeware shops, you can even cut those in half with the wheeled nippers, so they are a very useful tool. The other kind of cutters, if you do have them, you will see the difference. You can cut glass with them, but they're just not very accurate. When I first started learning mosaics, we had to cut these type of golden tiles. We had to cut them with the other cutters that are not meant for glass. So it was a bit of a nightmare because you would get a lot of waste. And what happens with these tiles, you can see in my video, is because you have 2 layers of glass. So you have glass, gold leaf, and glass on top. When you use a pair of unsuitable cutters to cut these golden tiles, very often the layer of glass that's on top will chip off, and then you'll be able to see like the actual gold leaf, but that's no good. Your tile will be useless then for proper professional use. But these wheeled nippers are really brilliant because you can cut these gold tiles. If the nippers are in good condition, you can cut them accurately and not have all that waste. I've started working. As you can see, it's taking me longer now to complete this little bowl. I didn't expect it to take so long, to be honest, but there you go. You learn something every day. In total, I would say it took me almost 5 hours with breaks. I did have 2 or 3 breaks, but it took me about 5 hours to complete sticking the tiles onto this bowl. And that's because of what I said before. So if I had only used squares, then I probably would have finished it already. But because I chose to use all these random shapes and give it more character, it took me much longer. But if you get fed up, if you just get bored, leave it. Leave your work and have a break or come back to it the next day. Mosaics take time to complete. It's not like other crafts, so you do need to be patient if you want to complete something that will make you happy and satisfied at the end of it. You need to realize that it will take time. If you do have any adhesive or glue that is starting to set, remove it before it sets completely. I said this about the tile adhesive as well. Just because the tile adhesive or the glue is not completely dry yet doesn't mean that it will be able to hold the thing that you're sticking. So if it's starting to set and you haven't used it, remove it and put some fresh one on. This is why I love working with tweezers as well a lot of the times, because they're kind of a tool that you can use for lots of different things. So if you get used to it, you can use them for picking up your tiles to avoid cutting yourself. You can use them for placing your tiles. You can use them for cleaning, scraping. They're just very, very useful. Now, initially, I wasn't planning to grout this little bowl. I had an image in my mind of how I wanted it to look, and the way it looks now is very close to what I had in mind. But as I was carrying on, as I was almost completing sticking the tiles down, I realized that it's not really exactly the way that I wanted it. And so in the end, I decided to put grout, even though my gaps were tiny. I still had some areas left over that I wasn't very happy with. So I decided to put grout just to make the whole thing a bit smoother. You can also get these type of gold tiles in other colors. So the ones you see here are green, lime green, turquoise, blue. There's also some 2 or 3 very dark ones, like the one I'm just using now. It's like a charcoal black, but it is actually gold leaf. But they also come in red, orange, and I'm not sure what other color. Obviously you get the silver, which I used for the Moroccan table, and then you can get the gold, but in different shades of gold. So it goes from a copper gold all the way down to a very, very light yellow gold. They are very, very beautiful. And the way these are made are, they are fired in a kiln. So the sandwich that I mentioned before, the glass sandwich, obviously you need the glass to stick onto the golden leaf, and then the other glass that's on top, you need that to stick onto the golden leaf. So they go in the kiln, but it's a very specialized process, and the people that make them obviously have the experience, to do that. If you are interested in buying some of these tiles, I can give you some details of the online shops where you can get them. I have seen websites where they sell each one of those tiles for £1, but that is not the case always. So there are places where you can find them much cheaper if it is something that you would like to try. If you do have an object at home that is damaged or broken, and you think to yourself, this is something that I loved, but now it's not usable anymore, think whether you can do something with it. And perhaps one thing you can do with it is to mosaic over it or on top of it. If you have a favorite plate or a favorite mug or something like that that is broken, that can also be used to make a mosaic. Obviously there's a different process to that, but there are things you can do with broken plates or broken mugs, you can cut it into smaller pieces. These nippers that you can see now on your screen, they are ideal for something like that. So one way to do it is, what some people do is, for example, if you have a plate and you want to cut the plate into smaller pieces, you put it in a plastic bag, close the bag, and then you hammer it. So you put it on a table or something, and then you just break the glass with a hammer, and then you can get pieces. But another way to do it is, if you have these type of nippers, then you can actually just cut the glass. It will come out in random shapes. It won't come out straight. Your cut won't be a straight cut, but it is a way to cut it all up, and then you can use the pieces for a mosaic. If you have a wooden base that you would like to use, just make sure that it's clean, that it doesn't have a thick layer of paint on it or varnish. If it looks like it's just too smooth, then you will need to sand it down with some rough sanding paper, or just make like scratches on it with a knife very carefully, or a Stanley knife. So in other words, you need to try and roughen the surface before you mosaic onto it. If you have something that is moldy, I don't recommend using it. But if you really want to use it, and you think to yourself, I don't want to throw this away, it is possible to clean it with a special mold remover spray, obviously wearing gloves, and you're just going to have to scrub it and scrub it and scrub it until it gets very clean, and ideally leave it in the sun to dry for as long as possible, because the sun kills mold as well. So you might be able to use it again, and then if you are going to mosaic on it, maybe it's a good idea to spray it again with an anti-mold spray, and then leave it to dry, and then you can mosaic on it. But the main thing is to clean it really well, scrub it down, and clean it with an anti-mold spray, not bleach, but there are special sprays you can get. I hope that I am giving you ideas, and that I am inspiring you to do something completely different, something that you haven't tried before. You can use objects that you already have at home if it's not possible to buy any tiles, or if you just don't want to spend any money at the moment. You can use buttons, you can use beads if they are kind of flat, but you will need to use tile adhesive for that. You can use flat pebbles. You can use broken plates or broken tiles, which I have already mentioned before. You could even use kind of pieces of plastic, if you happen to have something like that. You could actually use these nippers, these glass wheeled nippers. You could use them to cut buttons or other pieces, flat pieces of plastic. There are people who make mosaics out of broken up CDs, and CDs are plastic, so I don't know how they cut them, but I'm sure you can think of ways to do that as well. So what I'm saying is, use your imagination. I just used these because I had a lot of them, and I thought it would be nice to enjoy seeing them instead of them just being in a box somewhere. You will see the finished tiling in a minute. Obviously, it does get a little bit trickier as you go up the curve, and especially where your angles are, your corners. You just need to think a little bit about how you're going to cut your pieces and how you're going to fit them to follow that curve. But it is possible, it's not something difficult. This took me a few hours to complete. It took me almost 5 hours with breaks. I did have 2 or 3 breaks in between, but I must admit, it took me longer than what I expected. And that's because I chose to put random pieces in, randomly shaped pieces in. If you do have any other ideas, things that you would like me to try, or other things that you need help with, please get in touch with me. I don't know when we will start doing our classes again at the Expressions Cafe in Warsaw at 73 Bridge Street, but I hope it will be soon. It will be really nice to see you all again in person. Keep in mind as well that when you are making a glass mosaic or a mosaic with ceramic tiles, it will make your object much heavier. So just keep that in mind if you want to make something that you want to send to somebody. It will make your object much heavier. For a vase, I suppose that's a good thing, because then your vase is more stable. And you will see the finished project in a minute. Not the finished project, but the finished tiling in a minute. Just finishing off those curves. And now you can see the finished bowl. So far, it looks very neat on the camera, I have to say. It looks very nice, but that wasn't the case in real life. I wasn't really happy with the result inside. So like I said, these are handmade tiles, so they were not completely flush, so they were not exactly the same thickness. So the first thing I did was I cleaned it up a little bit with nail polish remover. There was some glue left on top of the tiles, so I'm just very gently cleaning it. You don't want to put too much, you don't want to push it down too much, because you don't want to reactivate the glue. You know, this type of glue, clear glue, will come off, I think, with acetone. So I just did it a little bit, just to clean it up a bit before I do my final grouting. And when I finished doing that, when I finished cleaning it with the nail polish remover, I used the usual grout that we use at the cafe as well. It's just ordinary grout and tile adhesive. You can get it in different colors, but I just have white. This one is the Unibond one. And you just go in with a spatula. This edge was basically a step between the tiles all around the edge and the tiles inside the bowl. So you can see it's dark. It was a blue, the blue that you see on the side of the tiles, but it wasn't nice, it wasn't pretty. So it needed filling. So that was the first thing that I did. And then I decided to grout the inside as well, to fill in any gaps. In my personal opinion, grout really does help to make your mosaic look neat, but it just comes down to personal taste and also what use is going to be had, you know, from your object. It's also for safety when you're using glass tiles with sharp edges. I think it's better to put grout, because then it's just a bit safer when people are touching it, if people are going to pick it up, or children. You know, you don't want your children messing with your beautiful objects, but it's just safer. Ideally, you want to have 2 or 3 days, even for a small project like this. So like I said, it's a process that takes time. So day one would be preparing your base, cleaning it, sanding it, getting your tiles together, sticking your tiles down in place. Then day two, the glue is all dry, and then you can move on to grouting, which is what I'm doing here. Then really you are meant to let the grout dry properly before you do any painting or any final cleaning. So at this stage now, I am finishing the grouting, and then I'm just going to clean it very, very gently with a sponge. I'm just stroking the surface with a sponge, because otherwise all of your grout is going to come off again. So what you're trying to do is you want to apply the grout and clean it up a little bit, just to make it easier to do the final cleaning in the end. For this video, I didn't have the time to let the grout dry completely, which is a shame, but I still wanted to show you the finished project. So this grout that I've applied all around the edge is actually at an angle, and then you get that curved edge again, because that gap wasn't big enough to put more tiles there, if you know what I mean. It was a little step that was created between the tiles on the edge and the tiles that go inside the bowl. So it's much more logical just to fill it in and paint over it. If you like, you can just leave the grout white if that's what you like. But in my case, I wanted to paint it a very similar color to the blue tiles that you see, the turquoise teal colored tiles. So after a few hours, I wasn't able to leave it overnight, but I left it for a few hours. The grout was almost dry, but not completely dry. So I'm cleaning it a little bit more. As you know, when your grout is completely dry, you can scrub it more. Here, I just need to be very, very gentle with it. Clean the edges. You can use a little bit of water. Don't use any soap or anything like that to clean grout. You're not cleaning up dirt. You're just cleaning a surface from the grout only. A little spatula can also be very, very useful. Again, you can find these in even cheap craft shops or children's craft departments. A little spatula is just very useful if you're doing any type of crafts. You can't really see now in the video, but the cleaning wasn't up to my standards. It's just good enough for you to see what I'm trying to create here. And the paint that I'm using is acrylic paint, which I had at home, but you can use watercolors, you can use gouache, you can't use oil colors really, but any type of paint, poster paint, children's paint, natural pigments will work. If you are using natural pigments, obviously you need a binder, so you can use PVA glue as a binder. Acrylic will stick quite well onto things from my experience, so onto different surfaces. So for an indoor project like this, you can just use a good quality acrylic color. You can't really tell now, but the paint is actually mixing with the grout because the grout is still workable. I have said before that, that's not really a problem. You can mix colors with grout, but you can only mix a very small amount. So if you put too much paint with grout, it will change the consistency of the grout. But if you just put a few drops, that's not going to cause any problems. So I suppose that is something that I could have done in the beginning. So I could have taken a small batch of grout and mix it with my color and then apply it onto the mosaic. So there's two ways you can do it. Either you grout and then you paint on top, or you mix your paint with your grout. It's just that if you do mix your paint with grout, like I said, you can't put too much, so you can't get an opaque color like that unless you buy the grout already colored. So that's where the difference lies. And here I'm just painting over the whole mosaic. Really, again, you are meant to leave this for a bit, so allow the grout to absorb some of that color, some of that paint. When I say leave it, I mean you can leave it for an hour or half an hour and then go back and clean it. In this case, I didn't have time to do that, so I'm just showing you, I'm showing it all in one go. So as you can see, I had to go over it again. It depends on your personality as well, I think. Some people like their mosaics to just look really, really neat, and some other people don't mind, and they don't mind if their mosaic looks kind of rough and, rustic. So it all just depends on what effect you're trying to achieve. Now, for the rest of the wood, because I really love this teal color, I decided to paint the rest of the bowl in the same color. However, I added a little bit of PVA adhesive because I just wanted to make sure that it will stick really well onto the wood. This is the adhesive that I used before to seal my mirror tiles, if you remember. Again, PVA glue is just such a great thing to have at home. If you have kids, you can use it for all sorts of crafts. You can mix it with things, like you can mix it with glitter, you can mix it with paint, as I'm doing here. You can mix it, you can use it for, when you use paper, like or mashed up papier, I can't say it anyway. When you use paper, in crafts, it's just a great thing to have at home. PVA glue, you can get it anywhere, it's cheap. You can get non-toxic PVA if you are concerned about that. Just make sure you clean up your brushes straight away. And again here, I'm just doing everything really fast, but I hope you enjoyed my video. The last bit of video, you will just see the last week's project in the dark. And I hope to see you soon. Have a good week and take care of yourselves. Bye.